Jordan, you know what? I woke up today and the Tesla had a lower state of charge than it had when it went to sleep last night. What on earth happened?
Did it now? There's so many things that could result from fancy, but one of them is phantom drain.
Phantom drain. Wow, that's great that you bring that up because that's what we're talking about today.
What?
Today, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. Jordan and I are going to tell you all about phantom drain, but also specifically that Tesla has introduced an update to the Tesla app that's whole purpose is to conserve the vehicle's battery by only waking up the car when you send it a command, not just when you open the app. Seems pretty straightforward. EVs are all about efficiency. So let's plug in for all the details of this update and talk about exactly what phantom drain is for EVs because it probably affects us all. This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for out of spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes. Okay, Jordan. Yes, thank you. We are talking about phantom drain. Some people also call it vampire drain, which refers to the gradual loss of battery charge in an electric vehicle while it is parked and not in use. So it's not while you're driving it around or even sitting in the car using like the infotainment, just hanging out. It is the energy that is consumed while you're not driving, while it is stationary. But this is a pretty common occurrence for EV drivers, is it not?
Yeah, I think quite a few EVs say suffer from this, almost like it's an illness. Do you deal with phantom drain? If so, here's your solutions, and maybe we can offer some solutions because, yeah, and I do want to preface with what phantom drain really is,
Mhm.
because some people will use that term when they describe how their Tesla or Rivian, notably, loses some charge overnight. But usually what they're referring to and what's most noticeable is the draw that gear guard or the sentry mode on a Tesla uses by monitoring your vehicle for a while. I mean, people have notably complained, even though it's technically their own fault, they'll leave their Tesla at the airport for 5 days and they come back and it's like 20% or something dramatic lower. I do agree that is a lot of percentage that was lost, but that wasn't necessarily phantom drain. Maybe a portion of it was, but a lot of people have, gear guard and sentry mode enabled. It's great security. Well, a lot of interesting things have been caught on tape that way, but that's not really what we're talking about here. There's other means and methods for the battery to just lose a little bit of state of charge overnight, and there's so many things that could cause that. And one of them, I guess, is how your app is working with your car. So,
Yep.
notably with Tesla's case, which is what we're discussing today, Tesla has rolled out an update to the mobile phone app. So, this is not an update. Some people might see the headline and be like, "Oh, update for my Tesla." No, not really. This is an update. I think it was what 4.35.0, something like that, for the Tesla app on your phone, whether iPhone or Android. I'm not really sure if that's a different version across different devices, but this should reduce the draw by up to 40%, supposedly. That was originally attributed to phantom drain. Now, I don't even think phantom drain is a term that Tesla themselves use. It's kind of a urban dictionary term, for lack of a better term, of yeah, just the phone essentially constantly pinging the car, but the car also does things as well. There's cases where the car would like maybe lose percentage as portrayed by the car overnight because maybe the temperature dropped a ton, and so the BMS kind of swayed. There's a lot of things that it could be, but how do we break this down, Fancy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point is to say it's not an update in the Tesla, but it's your app because when you open the Tesla app prior to now, it would, yeah, ping your car. It would cause maybe extra or unwanted pull on the vehicle's battery when it's not really needed. So now it's just when you send a command to the car, then it'll actually like wake the car up and use some of that energy. So it's finding efficiency through this route, which makes sense. I think generally we have really improved on this technology. Phantom drain shouldn't be a problem if you're noticing and you're not running sentry mode or other kind of safety features where the car is really using energy while it's stationary, you shouldn't be seeing a dramatic change. So if you are, definitely get that checked out. But this is another way that Tesla's looking to be efficient, which is the goal of EV automakers everywhere. And it's not always that, maybe we think about it, the app is actually creating a draw. So it's important, I think, to update. I saw the update on my phone. Like it says, what it fixes is to conserve the vehicle's battery. The app only wakes it when you send a command. So that's the update. But it is, if I update that, but we have access to the same Tesla and you don't update your app, technically it could still be pulling some, although I think typically people are updating the apps on their phone pretty often.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times the apps automatically update themselves. It's slightly different from the car in that regard, where typically it's just updating. I'd say few people that I know have manual updates turned on for their app updates on their phone. But yeah,
Yeah.
you bring up a good point. I'm really curious. I don't know how this would necessarily be measured, but I'm just curious if, for example, like the car you are currently driving, Beak, our beloved Model 3 from years ago, 5 years old, something like that. A lot of people have access to that car. It's kind of an out of spec car, for lack of a better term. Kyle and Alyssa and me and you and I think Colton maybe, and I'm not sure who all has apps on their phones talking to the car. So, is this the case where if one person updates it, the total amount of drain, like maybe a portion of that 40%, is dropped, or is it like useless until everyone updates it? That's a question I kind of have. Of course,
Mhm.
we haven't really heard any clarification from Tesla in that regard. We don't
No.
typically hear clarification from Tesla, period.
Uh-huh.
But this is the speculative thoughts that I have occurring in my
Yes. I think it's a good curious thought. And it's kind of like, yeah, well, everyone update and then you won't have to think about that. But it is curious, like all the different channels to the car that exist that could be affecting something like the state of charge, like how much energy it's using. So it is important to uh to do this update and try to have as minimal power that isn't needed sucked out from the car like this. And it's not the end of the world. Phantom drain, I think, is usually like it shouldn't be a problem, like I said. But if you are waking up like in an ice car and you randomly have less fuel, obviously that would be a problem. But with EVs, the way that they're built, there's a lot of remote monitoring going on and other systems that are running when the car is sleeping, quote unquote sleeping. And that's kind of different from ICE platforms. But uh, Kyle did have an episode previously with his dad, which I'll pull up in a second. But one note that he did have is that EVs that are built from ICE platforms typically have a minimal power pull on the battery due to the fact that those original ICE vehicles and those chassis were designed to not pull from the 12-volt battery and just overload that battery compared to now EVs are built or if EVs are built from the ground up, there's a huge battery to pull from, so maybe engineers see that as you don't necessarily have to be so specific about it. What do you think?
Right. I wonder how much laziness this has allowed in the industry of like, oh, if I'm just draining a few volts here and there, that's not a big deal. But like those, every little bit of drain does add up over time, even with a big battery. And a lot of times, I don't think maybe they're just not optimizing it as well. I would be curious if we have any, Lucid owners in the in the chat, in the comments, in the audience, because Lucid in my head is another company very attentive to detail. They're
Mhm.
very efficient with how they're well, getting the range they do from not a huge battery pack, and of course the motors and everything. So I wonder if they have that same approach to the software, or do we have people who drive Lucids who have noticed some annoying phantom drain, which would actually be fairly problematic because it's such a compared to a Model 3, it's a much bigger battery, maybe
Mhm.
40, 50 kilowatt hours more than a Model 3. So phantom drain on a Lucid would be more energy total. So I'm curious if
Mhm.
they have, or if other cars have taken some meticulous approach to the programming and design of that software.
Mhm. And I would love to lay out, like, the causes of phantom drain just generally so you can have an idea, but before we get into that, I did wanna show y'all, something that was s something that came up when Kyle and his dad did an episode about this on the podcast. How long ago is this? This is from a year ago, so I will link this in the show notes or you can go find it, but, yeah, just thought everyone would enjoy this.
So I walked into town on a Saturday night and I saw my car had a light on it and it said your SOC is lower. I'm giving up.
I love it. I absolutely love it. That is Dave from Out of Spec Dave, Kyle's dad. doing a quick little ditty on phantom drain or vampire drain, whatever you want to call it. But that was kind of sparked because Kyle, and you just mentioned this too, but talked about this BMS sway. So the battery management system, it's always active. It monitors the battery's health and safety and state of charge and consumes some small amount of power. But yeah, this battery sway basically can affect it. And of course, Dave had to start freestyle rapping, which maybe we should have some more of that on the podcast in the future.
We just need more of Dave on the podcast, period.
We
He's
do. I know.
fantastic.
Dave is fantastic and has plenty of amazing EV stories to tell. But yeah, BMS sway is one of them. And then also battery pack loss due to, or capacity loss due to temperature, because batteries they like to be a certain temperature to function. And if you have a really cold night or a really hot day, the car will be functioning in some way or another to try to achieve this, at least a better temperature for functionality. So that also can maybe cause a phantom drain. But if you think about it, that's also okay. Well, I kind of want that to be happening because I want my battery to be at the right temperature. Right, Jordan?
Some cars do that more or less, and other cars may even give you the option to turn that off. And there may be, yeah, there may be like a deep sleep mode where it's like, oh, I'm traveling for 2 months. I don't want my car to care for its battery during
Hmm.
that time because the car doesn't need to have it ready to drive. But I don't know. There are a lot of little nuances with all these causes, so I'm glad we're laying them out.
Yeah. I mean, telematics and connectivity systems, like we're talking about with the app, the remote monitoring and software updates and internet connectivity, those all require energy to stay operational, to stay on essentially. So this kind of thing with the app is a little way to say, okay, like where can we not maybe pull energy, even though sometimes we have to just due to the design of the car. That one seems a little bit inevitable. But one thing that you also mentioned is the security systems, like Sentry mode, alarms, monitoring systems where you can watch the cameras. Of course, those are going to consume power if they're remaining active, especially for a long amount of time. But that might be worth it to you, and that's not really a phantom drain. That is using a functionality of the car, but you just might not be driving it.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are all, I'd say, relatively expected causes. I mean, phantom drain doesn't necessarily mean a huge bad thing, but it's
Yeah.
still worth keeping an eye on. And even ICE vehicles, gas vehicles are not unsusceptible to it. I mean, notably, I had a friend with a recent Miata, and he kept coming out to a dead 12-volt battery because there was just a weird fluke phantom drain happening. And
Mhm.
the dealer, I think, had to like do a some sort of software reinstall in the car to fix something. So even though a lot of this is not necessarily abnormal, you should still keep an eye on it. And if you have question, if you're like, wow, this is draining 3% every night and I don't even have Sentry mode turned on, that could be a bigger issue. Maybe worth checking out.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Now I think back to the Subaru Outback I had in Colorado through the winter months, and sometimes the battery would just like kind of die in the winter months, and I was like, okay, I guess. But there were these ancillary things that were happening, and who knows? I don't really know exactly what. But when the folks would come and trade it out, they're like, yeah, this happens sometimes. I'm like, oh,
Mm,
okay. But it's
yep,
called phantom drain, but it's not necessarily this unknown ghost that is lurking around and taking the energy out of your battery. You can also do regular monitoring and track it for yourself. When this was happening to Tesla Model 3s like more significantly in the past, folks would use TezLab, TEZLAB, and they were tracking their vehicle's power usage and found differences between the Model 3 versus the Model S and the Model X. And then also when the Rivian, the R1 series like first came out, a lot of Rivian owners were experiencing phantom drain in these earlier versions of the software and even Ford F-150 Lightning. So like Jordan said, it's not uncommon, but it's something to know about and just to be like an educated driver in general, whether it's ICE, I guess, or definitely EVs, because state of charge is really what we care about. Yeah, I mean, is there
exactly.
anything else that we would really want people to know about phantom drain? I mean, it's a common occurrence. It's not something to actually be scared of. If you see it in a headline, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy an EV. It should not be a problem.
It sounds scary, and maybe some headlines use that. In fact, Francie, surely you should title this something like "Phantom Drain is the end of Tesla." No, it's just clickbait is yeah, it's a funny thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just it's a thing. And so I mean the main headline that brought this to our attention was the whole app being updated, I guess, to improve this. And I guess I don't know if it's a concern or a fear or a worry or just a thought I'm having is what about some certain circumstances where the app needs to tell you information on a regular basis without you really doing some interaction. Because
Mhm.
ideally, with their discussion is like, well, the app doesn't ping your car unless you ask it to specifically. Like, okay, I'm going to turn on climate control. That sends a signal to the car, wakes up the car, turns on climate control, like, or whatever else, sending directions to your car. But I wonder, like, what if you have a Tesla widget on your phone? Will this still properly operate? Or will it be like a periodic update? Like maybe the car and your phone will ping each other,
Mhm.
once every 10 minutes instead of constantly. I wonder what that logic is. I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to figure out. And it
Mhm.
might even be something you could, I don't know how you could check on that exactly, but
I mean,
there's ways to try.
yeah, when I think about it, I feel like that would actually be the cause of a significant phantom, quote unquote, "phantom drain" from anyone. Because who's getting in their app all the time and being like, "Oh, I just like, oh, I'm free, so let me just see how my Tesla's doing." Like, I feel like you're not really checking it unless you're like, "Where's the car? I wanna lock the car, unlock the car, precondition the cabin." I feel like it would be more of those widget things. So perhaps it's that kind of, okay, these widgets, whatever it is constantly calling to the car, waking it, and this is a way that we can eliminate that kind of stress on it. Light stress.
Yeah. I really admire, or I'm impressed by software engineers who are extremely efficient with their coding, because that's the thing.
Mhm.
There's inefficient and efficient coding mechanisms and just better ways to run algorithms. And I think that's something you really have to care about with an EV, maybe more than we have in the past. Like you said
Mhm.
earlier on, it's like, well, on one hand, you have this huge battery that could run a computer for a long time. So who cares if it's always doing something in the background? But I think we're
Yeah.
getting to that point where we're trying to embrace efficiency more. We're trying to get away
Mhm.
with, how can we use smaller batteries to get more range? And any sort
Yeah.
of phantom drain on a smaller battery is more noticeable than it would be on, say, a Cybertruck battery. So,
Mhm. That is a really good point, and I'd love to hear what people think about that in general. 1, are you checking your app all the time? But 2, is this significant to you? I do think that you bring up a good point that just if we're approaching efficiency in general, we're gonna look at every step because we've overcome these big hurdles in efficiency so far, where it's like, "Okay, we've got pretty efficient cars. We're gonna keep getting better," and that means we do need to get more and more granular with it, and there's ways that you can kind of avoid or mitigate phantom drain, but you can't totally eliminate it. Like we've talked about, some things are just going to happen, but you can monitor your car, make sure nothing looks funky that you need to fix, get software updates to your car, also update your apps, of course, park in if you can, moderate temperature conditions, but sometimes you can't. So just knowing that this will affect the state of charge or the energy that is required to manage the thermals of your battery. That's helpful. And then Jordan did mention like deep sleep modes, power saving modes, but generally I feel like these aren't things that you will typically do unless you're gonna like ship the car or leave the car sitting for a really long time. But then also if you don't want Sentry mode running, sometimes these features are just on and they're draining the battery. Maybe you don't really want it, or maybe you want Sentry mode, keep that on, whatever. But other things, you can also make sure that you're running the accessories that require energy that you want to be running. Overall, not that big of a deal, I'd say, but it's an interesting topic when it comes to efficiency of EVs, which is always at the middle of the conversation that it's built around.
exactly. Yeah. Always interesting to see updates, whether it's the car side or the phone side. People don't always pay enough attention to the app side of things. And I'm hoping to cover more app side of things in the future, because there's a crazy disparity in app functionality. I mean, there's like Tesla and Rivian, which have fantastic apps, and then there's Kia. Anyways, so
Sure.
it's just
Yeah.
it's
Speaking
mixed
of,
mixed bag out there.
you still have the VinFast, right? You should download the app and
I should,
I
yes.
could
Let
I
me
could
let me
give you
try that.
access. Or maybe I feel like you just have to log into my account, which is fine too. But yeah, and check it out because it does give you information about where it is, the state of charge, if it's charging, but I haven't had a ton of success with like unlocking the doors from
Hmm.
afar or with the app. So I'll let you check that out. But yeah, let us know what you use your EV apps for. Have you ever had to deal with phantom drain? Like, what was your story? Or if this has never affected you. Either way, now hopefully you have some information so you can understand what phantom drain is, that it's not some spooky ghost lurking around your EV or a vampire waiting to suck your blood. Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in for another episode of the Out of Spec podcast. We appreciate it. We love you being here. Drive safe, stay charged. See you next time. Bye bye.